Hello all. In this video, let's talk about chapter 5 in the environmental science syllabus of ICSE, and that chapter is food. Though the name says food, we are mainly going to talk about the process of getting the food, which is basically agriculture. So we'll see what is the syllabus that has been prescribed by the board. Now, as per the syllabus, we need to know what sustainable agriculture is and then the various methods or practices that are in place for sustainable agriculture, like mixed cropping or using drip irrigation or using organic fertilizers, gene banks, genetically modified organisms, etc. If you see the syllabus here, we'll be focusing on what it is and then the advantages and disadvantages. And then the second part of the video will be about the global food security and how food aid can actually resolve this problem. Now, because this is a review video, we'll be moving across or we'll be focusing more on the process and quickly upon the advantages and disadvantages. In case you want me to do any video specifically about a particular topic from here, do write below in the comments. So let's see what sustainable agriculture is. See, we have talked about sustainability or sustainable development earlier as well. Sustainable is basically meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their needs. So when we say sustainable agriculture, it is basically focusing on increasing the production of food for the ever growing population in the world without damaging the natural resources which are used in agriculture, like soil or forest or water, etc., and at the same time enhancing the quality of the environment. So in simple words, you want it for the present population. At the same time, you can't harm it or you can't spoil it for the future generations either. That is what we call as sustainable generation. And the farming needs to be done in a sustainable manner. Otherwise, within a few years, we'll be out of resources and we'll have no food to even feed the current generation. So that is the reason there are a lot of techniques that are involved in sustainable agriculture, and we'll be looking at a few of them that have been mentioned in your syllabus. The first one is integrated pest management, also abbreviated as IPM, a very important technique that combines the use of biological, chemical, cultural practices, and then using that it helps to control the pests. So you're controlling the pests not just by using chemical pesticides, but you are also trying to incorporate some cultural methods, that is the way of growing the crops, or you're trying to incorporate some biological methods over there using their own natural pathogens and so on and so forth. So integrating all of these mechanisms to control pests below their economically damaging levels is what we call as integrated pest management. The main aim of integrated pest management is to have a balanced ecosystem, so that, because if you introduce chemicals into the environment, it can change the balance, it can destroy species, it may allow some other species to dominate, which is not good for the environment. So you're trying to maintain the balance of the environment. At the same time, you're trying to save money, because when you avoid crop loss which can be caused by pests, that helps the farmer to save his money. So not only reducing the pesticide expense, but reducing the crop losses helps in saving money. At the same time, it helps us to keep a balanced ecosystem. So there are different steps that are involved in IPM, like you need to you have to know the action threshold, you have to set an action threshold, monitor and identify the pests, prevent the pests from coming in. Prevention is the first line of pest control, and finally control using the various methods that I listed above. This is not required so much in detail for you, but if you're interested, do put in the comments and I'll make a separate video on IPM. Now, integrated pest management has its advantages as well as disadvantages. The advantage, like we already saw, is the environmentally sensitive approach, because it causes less harm to the environment. It is economical because you use information about the life cycle of the pests, their interactions with the environment, and so you are able to reduce the use of broad spectrum pesticides in the environment. Why is that useful? Because if you use too much of pesticides for a long period of time, eventually the pests become resistant to it. This is a problem even with antibiotics. The same thing occurs with pesticides as well. So when you are decreasing the use of pesticides as such, it helps to reduce the development of pesticide resistance in future as well. That's a very important thing for the environment, and definitely it is economical to the farmer as well. The disadvantage is that you need to have extensive planning and knowledge about the pests, about the crop, about the environment, about the soil. Only then can you have a successful IPM. Secondly, you need to put in more resources because you're not using pesticide, so you have to have a substitute for it. So you have to put in more resources. You should know what resources have to be used for having a successful IPM in your field, but it is a very good method. The second practice is use of genetically modified organisms, also abbreviated as GMOs. Now, when we say they are genetically modified, what you do over here is if you have an organism, that organism could be a plant, it could be an animal, or any other microorganism, a bacteria, an yeast, fungus, anything. Now, into this organism, you are inserting a foreign gene. So this could be the gene of your interest. Why is it a gene of interest? Because it is providing or producing a desirable trait. It is providing a desirable quality in that particular organism. Now you insert this gene of interest into the organism. What happens after that? Every time this cell, this organism multiplies or divides, each of the offspring is now going to carry that particular gene of interest. So that's a good thing, because now whatever I was interested in, my desirable characteristic is now inherited by all the cells, all the offsprings, and each one of them is going to show a better product quality. This gene that we are transferring, this particular gene that is being inserted, is called as a transgene. So any organism which is having that transgene is called as transgenic. Now it could be a transgenic plant, or it could be a transgenic animal, or a transgenic microorganism. Now when we see the application in plants, so whatever is shown on the left side, these are the application in plants, and what is shown on the right are the applications in animals. These are the two topics that you need to know under GMOs. When we see application in plants, it definitely helps us to increase the productivity. How does it increase the productivity? There's better disease resistance, there is better herbicide resistance, you can even include pest resistance. Somehow you can make the plant resistant to all the other problems that it has. Or you can have improved nutritional quality. What does that mean? You enhance the quality by adding some vitamins in the plant, or you make the plant produce some particular minerals, increase the amino acid content. So you are improving the nutritional quality of that particular plant. You make the plant have more salt tolerance. So the land might be high in salt and some plants are unable to grow over there. But if you include a gene that provides salt tolerance, now any plant can grow over there. So these are some applications in plants. When we see the application in animals, you want specific traits in that particular animal. What does that mean? You want milk with extra nutrition. You want the egg yolk to be extra yellow. It should look better. You want the egg yolk or egg to have a particular gene that is carrying some particular trait that you are interested in. So having specific traits or improving the quality of that particular food of that particular animal is something that you can do. You can enhance the yield of the animals, of the livestock, and one very important thing is you can provide disease resistance. Just like how you can provide disease resistance in plants, you can do that in animals as well. So these are some applications in plants as well as animals. Now let's see what are the environmental risks of GMOs. GMOs are known, or they are at a big risk of outcrossing. So they can transfer the transgenes, that is the gene of interest, to a conventional wild variety which is already growing in the environment, and that can lead to loss of biodiversity. So now after a few years, I might have only the GMO plants. I might lose out on the wild variety. That's a big problem. The second thing is it can cause harm to a non-target organism, or it can cause harm in the soil. It can cause harm to the water. One very good example of this is the monarch butterfly, whose habitat was destroyed because of the GM corn in North America. It's not because they wanted to destroy, but it happened so that the GM corn was not allowing the monarch butterfly to grow. So eventually it led to loss of its habitat. So it can harm the non-target organisms, again leading to loss of biodiversity. And the third one is you have a risk of super pests developing. What are super pests? Pests which are resistant to GM crops. So the GM crops, you might have made it resistant to a particular pest. Now the nature will outsmart you. The nature will come up with a pest that is resistant to the GM crop itself. So now the GM crop is unable to, you'll have to come up with some new pesticide to deal with that super pest. This is again a problem that is similar to human beings as well. Even in animals we have this problem. So risk of super pests is definitely there in by using GMOs for a very long period of time. The next one we have is developing new crop strains. It's slightly different from the use of GMOs because you don't insert any foreign gene over here. You're just letting two different strains of plants cross together, or mate together, and what you get, that genotype is different. It is a dissimilar genotype that is called as a new crop strain. So this is also called as plant breeding or hybridization, where now the new strain is having a desirable quality. That's what so you're getting a new crop strain, you're not inserting anything over here, but by the plant breeding technique you're getting a new strain with desirable qualities. Now here we mainly look for the development of HYV. This is very, very important as per your exam. That is high yielding varieties, or you could go for hybrid variety. We'll dwell a little more on HYVs in the next slide. Let's first see what's a hybrid variety. There's a small difference between the two. Now hybrid varieties are those which are produced by cross between the two different breeding lines. The plant species may hybridize in nature as well, but here you are letting it, you are forming it. Usually the hybrid varieties will have high yield, but that's not the only thing. Apart from high yield, the seeds will be of an improved quality. The plant may have more resistance to the winter season, or to high heat, to excessive heat. It may be more resistant. It may have more resistance. It may improve the appearance of the plant. Like you can see over here, this is a hybrid variety between broccoli and cauliflower. So this is giving a new resistance. It looks different. So that's very often used in horticulture. These are some things that you have for hybrid varieties. It's not just the yield, it's the other things as well. But let's see what are high yield varieties. High yielding varieties, so this is there in your syllabus as viability of high yielding varieties, which includes both the advantages and disadvantages. Now you could have, the focus here is mainly on increasing the yield. So you want crops in quick succession. What does that mean? If I was harvesting a crop after every 6 months, now I would like to harvest it every 2 months, so that in the same span of 6 months I am making much more money. I'm able to harvest more number of crops. So you could decrease the life cycle. The farmers can go for multiple cropping repeatedly. They can do, like, one example for this is we have high yielding variety rice, which can be harvested after 110 days, whereas the traditional variety can be harvested only after 130 days. So this is one example where you can shorten the life cycle and you can get more yield. Or you can make it drought resistant. So you need more water, but yield per unit area is much more. Also it becomes drought resistant. And the third thing is that it generally improves the socio-economic transformation of farmers, because now the seeds are being sowed throughout the year. It's not just during the monsoon period. You're getting more harvest in a shorter span of time. General socio-economic status of the farmers definitely gets improved. But the disadvantage is that you need to have controlled irrigation. The demand for controlled irrigation in HYVs is very high. You cannot simply pour water on them because they want controlled irrigation, controlled doses of fertilizers. Some HYVs are also susceptible to pests and insects, and they generally need more inputs like water, pesticide, fertilizers. So overall, more than the indigenous variety or the native variety, they do need more inputs, which can eventually cause environmental effects, because the fertilizers, more use of fertilizers and pesticides can harm the environment. It can cause pollution, it can cause health problems in the farmers. The fertilizers can lead to increased soil salinity. So HYVs have their own advantages as well as disadvantages together, which is considered as viability of HYVs. Viability as in how can they be maintained in the environment, how long or how good are they for the environment. The next thing we have is mixed cropping. Mixed cropping is also called as polyculture. So it has been mentioned twice in your chapter syllabus. Polyculture is same as mixed cropping, wherein you are using multiple number of crops. So like the name says, One main crop will be there. Along with that, you will have one or two subsidiary crops which are grown together, and you're going to harvest all the three, or both the crops. So it helps you in, getting more money, and you can grow more crops in the field at the same time. So also what happens is that the products and the wastes of one crop often help the other crop to grow. This is very, very popular across the world, polyculture or mixed cropping. Care has to be only taken that you avoid plants which are competing with one another. So let's see what are the advantages. Higher yield, definitely. You can use, the land is available more, because with the same labor, same machinery, you are able to grow two types of crops and get benefits out of it. It decreases the spread of pests. There is reduction of artificial fertilizers, chemical fertilizers, because the one crop's waste might be, is often used as nutrition or nutrient for the other crop, and the field is generally under continuous production. So again, it improves the farmer's socioeconomic status. The disadvantages are that some species or some plants are extremely specific about the soil that they require for maximum profit. So you can grow them, no doubt, but if you want to maximize their profit, you might have to change the soil type, which may not be suitable for the other plant. So that needs to be taken care, and you have to keep the plants very, you have to choose the plants properly, because otherwise both the plants will be competing with each other for the same thing, for the space, for the nutrients, and everything. So competition develops. We need to keep the needs of the soil have to be kept in mind when we are choosing the crops for mixed cropping. Different types of, you could say, there are different types of mixed cropping. The first one is intercropping. It is mixed cropping. It's just that when you're growing the plants, you're growing them in a specific pattern. I'll show you the pictures later. So two types of plants are grown in a specific pattern on the same land in proximity with each other. See, mixed, when I say mixed cropping, there's no sequence, but the moment I say intercropping, there's a particular sequence. That is what we call as intercropping. You use the space in between the crops, and the crops are grown in strips or alleys in between trees and shrubs. Very, very useful. Usually you'll see it between mustard and wheat, or you'll see coconut trees being grown at the end of rice field. All those are examples of intercropping. Then we have crop rotation. Crop rotation is where you grow multiple crops in sequence. So it helps a lot in controlling the pests. Soil will lose its fertility if you grow the same crop every year. Instead, what are you doing over here? One after the other, you are growing different crops so that the nutrients are being replenished. By the next growing season, because you have planted a dissimilar crop, it returns the nutrient into the soil. Again, very, very commonly used method and very useful as well. The third one is agroforestry. You are combining trees or shrubs around crops or pasture land. That's what you're doing over here. So example could be growing medicinal plants in a forest cover, or growing tea or coffee below the shade of big, big trees. That's an example of agroforestry. It reduces the pressure on the natural forest as well. So that's also one additional advantage over here, along with, of course, providing ecological balance, and usage of land is diversified. That is there. Polyvarietal cultivation is where you are using more than, or where you're growing more than one variety of the same crop. For example, I am growing two varieties of marigold on the same land, or I am growing two varieties of roses on the same land. That's polyvarietal cultivation. Same crop, different varieties. So you can see here, this is intercropping. The second one, what I've shown you here, is crop rotation. One after the other, you use the crops, you do, so that the land gets, or the soil gets replenished. And this is an example of agroforestry. The fifth one we have is conservation tillage farming. Now, tillage means you are tilling the soil. You are basically, mechanically agitating the soil. You are shaking up the soil. The What you're trying to do in tillage farming, there are different types of conservation tillage farming. You could have no till, where you don't till at all, entire year you leave it undisturbed, or you could have ridge till, where you plant the crops on ridges. So between the ridges, you do not do any kind of tilling. Or you could have mulch till, where you put the crop residues on the soil itself. So wherever you put the old crop residues, you're not tilling over there, you're not shaking, you're not disturbing the soil over there. This kind of tillage and planting system, you are trying to leave at least 30% of the soil surface covered with residue, so that it does not, you do not turn the soil over. You minimize the frequency, you minimize the intensity of tillage. Why is it important? Because that helps us to use the nutrient more efficiently. Not only that, evaporation is suppressed, you are maintaining the soil temperature, you are controlling erosion. The main problem with tilling is that when you shake up the soil, you are making the soil prone to erosion. So you're controlling erosion over there, you are allowing the water to infiltrate more into the ground, there's more water retention by the soil. These are the advantages of not tilling or doing minimal tilling and farming. The disadvantages is that it is very labor intensive. Fungal diseases can occur more often, because if the earlier plant had a fungal disease, you have not removed that plant debris, you have left it in the soil itself, it can affect the new plant as well. And the usage of herbicides is more, because now these older plants should not start growing as weeds over here. So the herbicide usage is more, but otherwise overall if you see, the advantages are much more than the disadvantages. The sixth technique that has been mentioned in your syllabus is trickle drip irrigation. Or drip irrigation is where you are adding water to the plants drop by drop at a point near the roots. So you don't wet the leaves near the roots, drop by drop you're allowing it. Now you need to know what is the entire need for this drip irrigation. See, the need is that wastage of water reduces, and especially in places where the water sources are limited, this is a very good technique. Also, if the plant is very sensitive to high soil moisture, this is a good thing, because you are allowing it to go only drop by drop. It's very good for such plants as well, especially in fruit farms or vegetable farms, or even for decorative plants which are very sensitive to moisture. This is a very good technique. The operation is, how is it operated? You lay down pipes near the surface of the soil, and there will be holes in the pipes. Through these holes, water will be dripping into the soil in required quantities. So all the pipes will be connected to a source, and it will be set how much the water flow will be set, and the automatic watering will be happening. The advantages is that it is very precise, it's economical, it reduces the runoff because you're having controlled flow. So there's not excess water going off into the nearby lakes and then causing other problems. Very less runoff. The foliage remains dry, the leaves remain dry. Why is that important? Because it prevents the fungal infection. If the leaves are wet for a long period of time, that makes them susceptible to fungal infection. So here the foliage remains dry, which is very good. And the unwanted plant growth between the lines is prevented. Why? Because there's no water, that area is completely dry, so that prevents unwanted plant growth as well. The disadvantage is that often it has been seen that the holes in the pipes get clogged, and the initial cost for setting this up is very high, but otherwise after that it's a really good method. The seventh one we have is use of new organic fertilizers. Now under this you need to know about the integrated nutrient supply program, and they've listed out a few organic fertilizers about which you need to know. So the integrated nutrient supply program is very important for maintaining the soil fertility and plant nutrient supply at an optimum level. What do you do over here? You're optimizing the benefits from all possible resources. What does that mean? From organic resource, it means you are trying to use organic fertilizers, you're trying to use biological fertilizers, chemical or inorganic fertilizers, everything else, everything together you're using over here, regulating it, whichever is not so good to be used, use it less, whichever is providing maximum nutrition, use it more. So you are regulating it and making an integrated program which the farmers can utilize. This involves regulating the nutrient supply, so you have to study it, and you have to see which one is required more, which nutrients are required more in that particular soil. You are trying to improve and maintain the soil fertility. At the same time, it has zero adverse impact on the ecosystem, because you are balancing the fertilizer use. You are not ruthlessly using only chemical fertilizers. No, you are using organic ones as well, which are good for the environment. So that the combined usage is what we call as integrated nutrient supply program. Now you have four in your syllabus, four organic fertilizers which have been mentioned. So organic fertilizers are where you are naturally producing the nutrients. The first one is bulky organic manure, which is basically the decomposed substances like waste or dung, crop residue, farmyard manure. It's bulky, big chunks, and they provide nutrients in small quantities, so you have to apply more into the soil. The second one is biofertilizers. Biofertilizers are use of microorganisms. So there are some microorganisms which degrade some substances in the soil, and they provide a lot of nutrients. So you can use some concoctions of these microorganisms as biofertilizers as well. The third one is green manure. Green manure is where you use freshly cut crop or still growing crop. You use that in mulching, I showed you mulching earlier, you put it into the soil and that itself will provide nutrients for the currently growing crop. The last one is use of sewage sludge. So after wastewater treatment, the remaining matter, the remaining, that solid matter, which is now like a paste, that is what we call as a sludge. That sewage sludge is very rich in nitrogen, phosphorus, and organic matter. So that can be applied into the field to, to act as a fertilizer. What is a fertilizer doing? It is providing nutrients to the plant. So the last sustainable agriculture method that has been included in your syllabus is gene banks. Gene bank is basically the storage of genetic material. How do you store the genetic material? You could store it in the form of seeds, or you could freeze the cuttings of the plants. You're storing it so that the main objectives behind it is that you are able to preserve the genetic resources for the future. So you are able to conserve the biodiversity. Not just that, it also helps in global food security, which is our next topic. Now, when we say global food security, if I say food security, it means everyone across the world is getting food in ample quantities. That is the meaning of food security. But then there is an imbalance. There is, food insecurity across the world, and that is mainly because of the very high population. So population is very high in the world. Everybody is not getting food. In some places, the population is very high, in other places it is very less. So imbalance in the population distribution. Food distribution is also uneven. The worldwide distribution of food is again uneven, which means that some places have very good access to food, whereas other places, many people go hungry. So this is what we call as global food insecurity, or the problem of global food security. And a very good way out of it is food aid. So you need to know the role of food aid in achieving global food security. What does food aid do? It helps in fighting the micronutrient deficiencies. What does food aid mean? People or countries who have a surplus provide it to other countries or other places which are having shortage. That's the meaning of food aid. So this helps in fighting vitamin deficiencies, nutrient deficiencies, and it helps in ensuring that everybody is able to get access to food. So it is shipped from countries which are having surplus to places which are having more need of food. This was about global food security. And with that, we have come to the end of chapter 5. So I hope you have found it useful, the different techniques for sustainable agriculture and also the problem of global food security. I hope to see you all in the next video as well. Thank you.